Welcome. Welcome. My name is Kalina Ivanov. I'm one of the co-founders. Please, this is not a red carpet. I'm one of the co-founders of the Production Designers Collective, together with an amazing other designer named Inbal Weinberg. And we have been working on this event for about a year, but it's just a tiny part of our main plan for global domination for production design. It's basically, that's a very, very simple goal. This is the kickoff panel for LA. We're starting the LA celebration. We have 4 events and more in LA. Please get on our website, Production Design Week, and you see the events, sign up, go visit us, come meet us, drink with us. We love that. I am of the two of us, Inbal is holding the fort in New York, and I'm holding the fort in LA. So, what I wanted to tell you is I'm really proud to share that we have 220 events over 45 cities in every part of the globe, including Iran. We're very proud. Iran, South Korea, very difficult to wrangle. I don't know why. Good films, but don't want to participate. Russia. We have Philippines, and it's been really an amazing achievement for the two of us, only because it was just she and I 9 years ago sitting in a coffee shop on Avenue B in New York City and thinking, how do we bring the global community of designers together? And we brainstormed, and out of that, technology was on our side and helped us create a virtual professional organization. And we have a few core principles, and I'm going to read them to you because they're very important. Number 1, create a relaxed space where artists can exchange ideas freely. Number 2, invite artists from every stage in their careers, from beginners to mid-career to legacy designers, which is our panel. And number 3, never charge a fee. That was very important to me because I don't like to pay for anything. And I'm Bulgarian, so I don't pay. Never give any awards because God forbid I never want to be a judge on anything. And basically reach out to every country in the world that makes a film. No matter how small, no matter how big, we want to bring the global community together. This is, as I said, that's a very, very simple goal, and that's what we're doing today, and thank you all for coming. So basically, we created what I would call now Production Designers Without Borders. Basically, I think we need to change our name to that. And so here we are. I'm going to turn it over to Rick. This is his baby. He came up with this idea. It used to be called Level 7, which I always thought was great because it's like Cloud 9, where I'd like to live. I like to live on Cloud 9. And here's Rick, too. And I'm sorry, one more thing. I'm sorry, so sorry. I have a few. I forgot we had sponsors. We can't do this without help because otherwise it's just Inbal and I with one measly checkbook, So we have sponsors and we have some people who have helped us. And so we're going to start with a little video from Aztec wall coverings, and I hope everybody's using them because they helped us out. And we want to thank Joe Garrity and David Morong for AFI for helping us. And Susan, yes, and I have a helper. And Chuck, who is my white knight who comes and helps me when I realize there are 4 mics instead of 7. And I'm texting him from the plane. And so we have now a movement, basically, a family of people who help us. We're no longer alone. It's not just Inbal and I. It is really an amazing group of people who are helping us everywhere in all the globe. And go on our website and take a look what Brazil is doing, or Canada for that matter, or Australia. Very ambitious production design group. And now, speaking of ambition and most wonderful person, Rick Carter. Oh, well, okay. Well, yes. Rick says we should look at the video that I promised.
Yes. I think starting with the visuals makes a lot of sense. And also because what I think is amazing is, first of all, to collect all of us together. And then have this amount of imagery wash over as to an experience that we've all had individually, and of course in collaboration on the movies we've worked on, but also almost as a generation that has gotten into this profession of production design, found our way through, but it wasn't like we were just having an experience that we didn't share, because the visuals are the sharing of what we experienced. And I think that what we're going to try to do here, we'll see how it works, but it's not just talk on the surface of what we all did as individuals or collectively in our different movies, or even in the context of our careers, but actually what it means to be in this experience of visualizing that finds a form in movie making. And when you see it all wash over you, it doesn't matter like who did what or what little territorial thing mattered at the time. Now, and this is not even ours, this imagery is no longer just owned in any way by us. It's gone out into the world. So without saying too many more words, let's just take a look at all of it. I haven't seen how it's put together, but I know it's a lot of imagery, and then hopefully we'll get some insight into the people that have had so much to do with how it was created and realized.
Sometimes you get stuck in the movie at the last minute. White hair before I had white hair. Yeah. Quick, read. Save pictures of your work because they're really hard to find later.
Glad yours is disorganized. Definitely. No, I didn't, yeah.
Well, this ought to take 2 hours.
Finally, to the W. Is it alphabetical? Yes, alphabetical.
You're lost.
Get it loose.
Story of my life.
Ooh, I like his work.
Somebody has a film out now. That guy. I don't know if any of us even have a bun in the oven, do we? A film, you've got one.
Oh.
Dennis has one, great.
Did you meet on Badlands or?
We met on Badlands. Holds up. Or it's up to you.
That picture was taken this morning, obviously.
Costume similar. I feel compelled to say something here. Kalina told me to send my favorite pictures of myself, and somehow I just sent her a bunch of them. And I see that there are 3 here, and I think it was my unconscious desire to somehow clone myself, so I don't feel so much like the only hen in this rooster coop. I think my favorite one is with the hat that says, "The wrong man." There are a lot of those.
But look at all the hens here.
Yeah, I love it. I feel comfortable.
Yeah. Tide is turning.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Cool. 2 hours is up.
And just a little bit about me and info, and if you ever want to know more about our organization, just listen to this podcast. You'll know more than you need to. And that's it.
So any questions?
So I think what we'll try to do is actually just dive in. But one of the things I think I probably should do is give a little bit of structure or overview to what we're going to attempt. We may fall short, and that's okay. But this morning, one of the things that I was talking to everybody about was what we might be able to use as a loose progression of a way to talk. The reason I'm going to say it up front is because I have a feeling that once we get even just partially into this, the back and forth amongst various panelists is going to take the conversation to various places. So at a certain point, I might then come back in and say, well, now, do we want to try to move the conversation a little towards the next step in what I'm about to say? It doesn't mean we have to, nor will we, but I just thought I would lay it out there. And that is, and I've had a lot of conversations over the years with most of the people here, and particularly Dennis and I at times have discussed the progression of our lives. And so one of the things that we bonded over was our mentors, Richard Silbert for myself and Dean Tavaleras for Dennis. They never spoke with each other. They weren't friends. They were the same generation. We look at their movies, we can almost see the epoch that they're a part of. But all of us, to some degree, have been in dialogue with one another because we actually, I think, not only know that we've learned a lot from one another, but we want to share this experience that we've had. So the opening idea will be to talk about mentors, or who were we before we started becoming a production designer, what changed us enough to allow us through somebody or experiences to become a production designer. Then the other part is, in a progression, is what was, if there was some kind of an incident or inciting time that actually made us feel that we could do this job. What would that be like to revisit that from this perspective now? And then, as always happens in a second act, is when the plot thickens. And the plot thickening in this case would be anywhere from the obstacles that one faces along the way, but also, was there any time, since we all have so much work that we've done, where the boundaries between our personal lives and our cinematic lives and what we were creating started to blur, so that we can now even see why we might have been the right person at the right time to create some of the movies that we did. And then finally, in sort of honor of Spetses, which is the island in Greece where we had this meeting of people last year at this time, to try to see if there isn't something that's actually been learned. You know, the question that goes to Dorothy, what have you learned? And is there any way to convey that with words to this group and possibly beyond, especially to people who are coming up and just beginning to find out what production design is? This is not going to be about how we did what we did, as much as the experiences that we had. So if I can start with you, Dennis, and just ask you just to explain a little bit about what it was like for you to be mentored by Dean, and then if any of you, the rest of you in line or however you want to do it, address just what that stage of your life was like. I think we'll just start there.
Well, my journey with Dean was scary because they were of that vintage that they enjoyed the control, and the respect of the control. But Dean embraced me for one particular thing. I was able to do something that the other 5 men couldn't do, and that was graphic design. And I even though I studied architecture, I knew how to do all of that. But I saw an inroad, and finding a place where you can get into a group, and you can benefit from the knowledge that they all had was. I mean, I spent 5 years as Dean's assistant for no money, and I just listened. I listened and listened and listened to, you know, all of the analysis of whatever was in the room through all their films together and how that all worked. And it was, you know, I spent 5 years in terror trying to make sure that I was comfortable enough. And of course, at the end, they said, now you know, go out and make movies. And so I went off and did my first little film. And all I did was think about what would they do, the process. The process was really an amazing process because they were all masters, and I was just now beginning that little process of unraveling what all that meant and then applying it to the films that I have worked on.
Anybody else want to talk about their first mentors or times coming in?
Mentors. When I escaped from the Universal Studios drafting room to become a set designer and an art director, you know, you work with a lot of mentors, Harold Michaelson, Peter Jamison, Bill Malley, Jack Collis, there, you know, a lot. And from each one you pick up stuff, you know, you pick up, hey, this is cool, this is the right way to do that. But I'm going to go right to the last guy, who was a dear friend of mine, Mike Riva, and he was fantastic. So Mike hired me to do art director on Color Purple, and Mike was so great because he was so inclusive, and he would involve everyone and give you enough rope to hang yourself. And we started that movie, and we shot on stage originally, but most of it was in North Carolina, and we'd scouted it. We picked a farm, and at one point Mike said, "Here, you go to North Carolina and do that stuff, you know, the church, the juke joint, all this stuff." And I went there, and there's no internet or anything, and I, with Bob Scaife, the construction coordinator, tried to figure out how to pull this off. And I had drawings, but what I did was, when I got there, was drive around with Scaife, and we would find old buildings and buy them from farmers, chop them up, and reconfigure them into the sets. And it saved time, money, and finish, and everyone was very happy with how that turned out. But he gave me the license to do it that way. So I can't thank Mike enough. And then at the end, he said, and this is my last art direction job, and he said, "You should be designing." And I went, "Sure." He got called by Joel Schumacher to do Bright Lights, Big City. And he had some other job. Mike and I drove to Joel's house in Beverly Hills and knocked on the door, and Joel came to the door, and Mike said to Joel, "I can't do it. Here's who you should hire." Standing in his doorway. So that movie fell apart, but then Lost Boys came up, so Mike, as a mentor, not only was very talented, generous, great guy, but he kicked me off. I mean, he got me started in this as a designer. And for that, I'm forever grateful. Right, Laurie?
And
Loved him.
And I had the same experience with Mike. So just, profound.
I don't remember seeing you
profound.
there.
No, I was the guy right before. Anybody else want to?
Well, I wasn't lucky enough to work with these great designers. And I started at the Roger Corman School of Filmmaking. But the first director that impressed me was Terence Malik on a film called Badlands. And he became my mentor. And we grew up together making films over about 30 years. And we learned about the sets, which I'd never had any instruction on how to build. And we just figured out what we wanted to do and how we were going to do it. And it was a collaborative experience. It was really energizing and fun. I'd heard of Leon Erickson, who worked, with I think with Bob Altman and other people. And he similar to Bo buying buildings, if he needed an old door, he'd just go buy an old door. In the studio system, they would send a plan to the carpenters, they'd build it, then somebody'd paint it, then somebody else would age it, and then somebody else would hang it. But he just went to the salvage yard and bought 20 doors and used them for the film. And I thought, that makes so much sense. And that's kind of the way it progressed, you know, just kind of figuring out how you go. And many years later, I got on a set of a real designer, and I go, this is very similar to what I've been doing. So you all kind of figured out, you find better methods, but I think the important thing is just to keep making films and to make films and finding influences wherever you can.
I feel like I want to go back a little farther into our history about this. I went into the family business, I tell people, not because I'm a Nepo kid or I knew anybody in the film business, but because I had an addiction to fiction. I was always being chastised for reading under the blankets at night with a flashlight. And that came together very well with the rest of my family because I said I wasn't going to be an industrial designer like my father, who came home every night and would fall asleep on the sofa reading the Boston Gear catalog. How's the plot, Dad? My one brother went into being an engineer for Boeing. Another brother graduated from RISD in industrial design. I was going to be the family intellectual, the writer, the thinker, the philosopher, the whatever. But somehow, genes will out. And after a while, you discover that you're good at everything that everybody else in your family was also good at. So you just kind of tack right, you tack left, and then you find yourself in a place where, lo and behold, whatever it is you learned being around your family, how to solve certain kinds of technical problems, how to think about solving certain kinds of things, comes crashing into your addiction to fiction, and you discover, well, I mean, this seems like a pretty good kind of living. You know, I can make a living doing what everybody else in my family was sort of good at in different directions. And I can tell stories at the same time. It was a strange kind of confluence of incidents that dumped me into this river.
I'm curious about you, Jim. Well, I kind of started with, my mentors have always been my directors because I didn't really know what the job entitled and I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew that I had to do all of it because there was nobody else there. And which was great because that means you're given free range to, make the mistakes, pick up the doors from the salvage yard, do everything yourself. But the directors, luckily, that I started with also came in at the bottom and at the bottom at the top. And so I kind of say that like I didn't work my way up. My first job was as a production designer, but I was also the driver and the painter and the construction coordinator and everything else, and the prop master, prop builder. But my directors were the same way. They just decided that they had a story to tell and they could tell it, and they wanted to tell it in a way that they hadn't seen yet. And you'll find out that every director is different. They have different experiences. They have different skills at whether they can communicate visual things to you or not. And but they all have a personal experience. And so we kind of figured it out on our own, and they trusted me to help them solve their problems. And we just kind of made it up as we went along. And then eventually you find out that, oh, I need some really good people working with me. And then you start delegating and you get really good people. And then the worst thing happens, they leave because they're good or better than you. And then you've given birth to all these other designers. But that's the way it works. And if you do that, that means that you had a good team at one time.
Might as well. So I empathize a lot with KK and Janine especially. But I also have sort of a personal dynamic that sort of compelled me into a job like this, which was that my father was an engineer, my mother was an amateur artist, and I was an only child. And he worked for Bell Labs and for Western Electric and was shipped all around the world. And so my childhood was just, was always going to new places and going there with two people who didn't get along particularly well together and had sort of substance abuse problems. And so it was a chaotic childhood. And so I think I always liked to build things. I loved to build models. I could sketch, but I was always trying to make sense of stuff. And when I would see movies and when I would read fiction, that was a world that was constructed, and I took that as my model. It's that and music and symphonic music were the worlds that I would escape into that suddenly gave me context, gave me something I could escape into and make sense of the world. And so I didn't so much want to do this so that I could control and create worlds that I could go into. I did it because the exploration in the process of creating those worlds gives me an insight into what the world is really all about. And that's pretty much been the thing that drives my career. It's, you know, art is my salvation, and exploring the world and exploring the environments within which things occur, and also how environments contribute to really powerful imagery that shapes culture. That is something I've always been interested in, probably because of the way I was raised and the fact that the world didn't make any sense to me. And now I'm just trying to make sense of it.
Can I just jump in here for a second? I'm sorry.
I want my applause.
No, yeah. And I want you to get the applause, and I want you to get some more. Because I'm going to maybe come back to what I said, but probably won't, because this is going to go to where it goes. So what I'd like to do here is just to address something that Jim and I were talking about the last time we were together, and that is you had an insight, I thought, about the movie E.T. and what was at stake and what it was actually about in terms of saving something. And I wonder if you would just address that, because I think that might actually kick us into a level that starts to help you see the way we, I think as a group, think, the levels that we go to. If this is called level 7, and it could be legacy, whatever, this is what happens, I think, when you've been doing this for a long time, and then you can even see back to what you were doing. So would you mind just talking about E.T.?
Oh, sure, yeah. So this goes back to the idea that I'll read a script and then the process that's sort of described is the thing that I'll fixate on and say, all right, so show, don't tell. How do we show this? How do we create visuals that basically you can look between the seats on the airliner on a cross-country flight, and you can look at something and know what the story is that the person in front of you is seeing. In my analysis of E.T., what I detected very quickly is something that we all go through, which is the transition that Elliot is making is from magical childhood thinking to rational adult thought. And it's an awkward transition, it's a tough transition, and you have to eventually give up magical thinking and move on to rational adult thought. But you always keep that ability to go back to magical thinking when you really need it, because we need it sometimes. and it's a brilliantly written script, and there are a lot of things in it that were inherent from day one. But it also was a script that was shaped by pre-production, by a lot of the people that were working on it. And so, do you want me to tell that story about the tent?
Sure.
Yeah.
And also just about E.T., what for maybe Stephen and what you picked up on that it was maybe about in terms
It's,
of.
yeah, all about Stephen. Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this. I think I worked on the first biography of Steven Spielberg's life,
Yes.
and then Rick picked it up and did a more realistic version. But
With the same closet door.
what's that?
The same closet door.
Same
with
closet door.
louvers.
Right. Interestingly, the one flaw in the original E.T., everybody goes, Elliot finds E.T. sick in the creek and comes home, mom is shocked, and E.T. and Elliot are transported to the hospital. and the doctors and the government descends on the hospital, and then the neighborhood kids realize that the communicator's working, the spaceship's coming back, and they spring Elliot and E.T. from the hospital, and they take him to the landing site. Stephen was coming back from Europe, and at the time there was a pneumatic structure that was a temporary structure, which was the international airport. I don't know if you know about pneumatic structures, but they're inflated with positive pressure, and you have to go through rotating styles and everything else. Anyway, he was coming back in, and he had this brainstorm. He said, don't take him to the hospital. The government descends on the house, and you cover it with like a pneumatic structure like this. So he went straight from the airport to his office at MGM, Sony now, and called me. I was over at Culver City Studios and said, come on over. And he came over and he pitched me this idea, and I went, wow, this is brilliant. Yeah, it makes total sense. So instantly we lunge on how the hell do we cover this thing with a pneumatic structure, and found out it really was sort of impossible because you have to have a solid foundation around it, and there's a lot of problems. But and the more I looked at it and visualized it, the more I thought, yeah, it'll look like an indoor tennis court. It won't really be a really dramatic image. But I was playing with inside the hospital with this 90 millimeter polyvinyl chloride material that was a matte finish, and suddenly the artist Christo, I don't know if you're familiar with his work, where he really transforms objects in geography by covering them with material. I thought, why don't we do that? Because it still makes sense. They're isolating ET, they're creating all this filtered air and a positive pressure flow, they're keeping the environment from him, but what we get to do is cover a house in plastic, and you get to tug on it and light through it, and suddenly, you know, we're not talking, this is really powerful imagery, this is German expressionism, this is fantastic. So I was working with Ed Varro, and Ed did this wonderful little quick Prismacolor of the house covered in plastic and pitched it to Stephen. He loved it. He thought it was, yeah, this is it. This is fantastic. And then we had to figure out how to do it, which I had no clue. I had no clue at all how we're going to do this. And anyway, I'll wrap this up quickly because there's far better stories to be told. But on the day of putting the plastic over, the guy that showed up with the crane was drunk, and his crane was too heavy and would have crushed the sidewalk. And our construction coordinator, Ernie Depew, rode up and down Sunland Boulevard and found a crane, flashed his lights, pulled the guy over, gave him $500 and told him to come up. And this is the day before shooting. And you know, five attempts, and it all collapsed. And finally, on the last one, as the sun was going down, we draped it over the house and pulled it and tugged it and draped it, and we got the image that I think is probably one of the best ones in my career.
I'm just going to jump in, but please, you guys just go crazy whenever you want to.
Why don't you tell a story, Nick?
Okay. Bo, I wonder if you could just describe on the Birdcage the transformation and the duality between the way the apartment looked when you first see it with Robin Williams and Nathan Lane, and then how they remake it so they can look straight and it becomes gothic, and anything that went into that, because my family watches that twice a year, that movie. And so
Aww.
it's, I just really wondered if there's anything that goes with that you'd want to illuminate that duality.
Well, you know the story. You've seen the movie. You know, they're a gay couple, and they needed to tone it all down for when Gene Hackman and, you know, for when the parents came to meet them. So we went full monastic, stripped out. It took out all the, you know. Cheryl, what did we do? Cheryl's the decorator. It was brilliant. It was beautiful. What? I walked out?
That's a good production designer.
You take all the fun away?
No, yeah, we took away all the fun and all the beauty and made it scary and severe.
Well, it gave so much, obviously, for the actors to play off of, because now everything they were pretending to be, and it wasn't just like pretending to be normal, it was like gothic. So I just think that there's an exaggeration sometimes to what we get to do that speaks to something that's normal, but it's really for the actors then to get to feel what their environment is around them. Is there, this, I think this is the mic that's causing the sound, but let me just, but anybody, does anyone else want to comment on that level, or?
I'm kind of always jealous of the costume designers because I see these transformations when the actors come in and you see them in their normal street clothes, and then you see them with their new armor, and all of a sudden they've become a character. And so, in a way, we do that too. We don't just make the sets for the audience, for the entertainment. We also make them for the actors so that they can feel like, oh, this is my house. This really is my environment. And then they do the selling to you, to the audience. And so, in a way, we're in cahoots with them. And so it must have been terrible when you had to strip that house out and all of a sudden they just personality.
No, it was fun.
Yeah.
And it ended up being one of the funnier scenes for me when Gene Hackman and they're talking about their trip there, and the script was brilliant. Elaine May wrote it, but that movie I had to sell them when we started. I flew to New York. You're in a room with Mike Nichols and Elaine May and Ann Roth. This is the last time I felt young. And it was fantastic. And we would get in the Gulf Stream. Let's go scout Chicago, and we go to a drag show, and then go backstage afterwards. And it was kind of like, I don't know. For me, it was like, well, this is just kind of sad. Where's the joy? Now let's go look at. This is my Mike Nichols. Now let's go scout Savannah, and we would get in the jet, go to Savannah, eat, and then go to another drag show, go backstage, over and over. And I was very patient, but eventually I said, Mike, the original movie was in the French Riviera, the Riviera of the U.S. right now. You got to go see South Beach. It is amazing. My brother had a store there at the time. It was a very exciting, burgeoning, LGBTQ kind of place. Also, beautiful Art Deco hotels, and it hadn't really been fully exploited yet. And he said, okay, but we're going to stop in Palm Beach on the way. And I said, there's nothing there. It's just hedges. And you drive around, and Mar-a-Lago. And we scouted Palm Beach, and it was stupid. You could eat off the street, but it was just hedges. And then I said, Mike, I beg you, let's get a helicopter, and we will head out. I'm going to show you the shot. And we got in a chopper, went offshore, and did that shot. I said, crab the helicopter and come in low, like the Jackie Gleason show, the opening. This is a reference no one will know. And you crab in and go right towards the beach. And eventually, thank God, Chivo, best cameraman ever. You've worked with him repeatedly. Man, you want to get a good-looking movie, you get Chivo. So that shot actually was in the movie, but I had to talk them into Miami after Chicago, Savannah, and all these other sad places. But that's an example of how production design can enhance and rewrite the script. And then, the rest is history.
I'd like to tell a little story based on kind of like the rewriting my first Bond film was with Mark Forrester, and he came into my office and he said, I just read the script and I hate it. And I said, oh, okay. And back in my mind, I said, I'm not going to let him not let me do my first Bond film. So I said, I said, hey, Mark, what do we have? He goes, well, what do you mean? He says, we have one thing. And I said, he looked at me and I said, Daniel Craig. He said, let's look at that face. And I used something called the pattern language. I said, let's take that face, break that down, and create something, a language out of that, that you, your team and my team will put together as many images as we can to make up a story for this film. And we're going to start out with one thing. And look at those blue eyes. We're going to start out with water. And that's how we started the film. And I've done 3 James Bond films. I've done it exactly the same way the whole time. You know, as in concert with what you're saying is that everybody is looking at all the words, or not the words, and we look at the visuals. What are we going to do? How are we going to create that? How are we going to do something that's interesting for, you know, I had 21 Bond films to look at, and how am I going to do, you know, whatever I can do left, you know, at this point. So it's process. Everybody's coming through processes that probably the biggest weapon that we have, because it's our own process of all of us collectively, not only looking at millions of films, but learning from our mentors and collaborating with each other. I mean, I call Rick all the time. What the hell did you do on War Horse? You know, I said, shit, I'm just in trouble. I mean, I don't know what to do. And he goes, paint it black. Well, great. Okay, thank you. Bye. I mean, you know, we all have to be involved. You're not alone. First of all, you're never alone. It's all about collaboration. You know, look at this group. You know, we can imagine what we could do.
I think the thing about the script that's mentioned a couple times is you don't treat it with irreverence, but don't trust it, because it's not really there. The script as written is to move a story along, and it's usually a lot more dialogue than description. And if you ask 4 or 5 people that read the script, the same as when you read a book that has description, they'll say they saw different things. And what we have to do is kind of interpret what we think would best support those words. But it's not always there. And it's free to challenge those words. It's free to challenge the description. I think it's our duty.
I think you're
Amen.
absolutely right. I mean, I had a similar experience working on Catch Me If You Can. There was a whole section of the film set in France. And all of a sudden, I woke up one day and I realized, hey, nobody has scouted France. And the schedule says we're supposed to go there, like, immediately, the day after we finish shooting in North America. I mean, how the hell is this going to work? So I thought, I'm in real trouble here. You know, we talked to a location person who went where the script was written, which was Perpignan, called me and said, I got crickets here. There's absolutely nothing. I mean, I don't know where I should go or what I should do next. And I said, all right. I went home and I thought,
Palm Beach.
Palm Beach. Where can we go that looks like France in North America? And I realized, I went to Quebec once a long time ago. I think I know somebody in Quebec. I think I'll make a phone call. And that person immediately said, oh, yeah, we can find this, and we can find that, and we can find this. And, you know, so I flew to Quebec, and I looked at the Place Royale, and there was this wonderful, very modern building, was called a modern insertion into the old Place Royale. And I looked at that modern building, and I thought, I'll just cover that over. So I went back to Stephen, and I said, I think we're going to go to Montreal and to Quebec. And oh, by the way, you can't call it Perpignan because that's the south of France. We're going to the north of France, and I think we should call it Mont-Richard. And that's what we did. So don't be afraid to rewrite a few things.
And that was on a movie based on truth, right?
Yeah.
So
Well,
even
a
you
lie
can
of
change
the
truth.
of a lie of the truth,
yeah.
right.
We're very dangerous people.
What you said, though, about words being almost the enemy in the very beginning is so, yeah, you cannot trust the words. And that's, I think, paramount in any kind of analysis of the script in the beginning is to start assembling pure visuals that start to show the progression of the story. And I think that's another thing that's really a really important part of production design is transitions. You know, how do you get from one place to another? How do you set it up? And most important is, how do you make it visceral rather than a storybook of pictures? How do you make it an experience so that you instantly engage the audience and drag them into the world that you want them to inhabit with the cast of characters? And I think the way to do it is to really look at the fact that film is nothing but a series of images that tell a story, and that an image is, in most films, is composed of two components, which is performers and what's in back of them. And that's our world. We create that world that's in back of them, and we give the performers a sandbox, and we give them things as much as we can to interact with that world so that it becomes a real and viable and engaging world that tells the story that we're assigned to tell.
I think a lot of our work is designing with locations. That it's as important as the buildings, and I was working on the Revenant, and we had to show its journey for Leo's character, and only way to show that was to have each location distinct from the next, so you had a sense that he was moving. And you know, we took his trip that was about 600 miles, and you know, created it in a 1,200-mile area. But it was just the contrast, and I felt like I was painting with locations rather than sketchbook. It's
Yeah, I in 1917 I had dirt, and like Rick, there was just I had what we're going to do. How were we going to do this? And I had the art department get a bunch of white stakes, and I said to Sam Mendes, I said, and Roger Deakins, I said, you're going to come stand in the field, and I'm going to put a stake in the ground, and this is where the story starts. And we're going to end somewhere. I have no idea where it's going to go, but you're going to start reading and moving as everybody is going to move and create that. So we just staked out all the way to Scotland from London in order to make that work. And it's the same. I mean, you never know what you're going to end up doing. Mm-hmm. You never know what the journey is going to be. You read the script, and then it's a dream to you. How do you make it real? And that's really what we end up doing in the end, is making it real.
Yeah, it's an organic process. I mean, I always like to quote this Theodore Rutke poem, which is, I wake to sleep and take my waking slow. I learn by going where I have to go. And I don't know where I'm going ahead of time. I have some feeling, some ideas, some research. But really, it's a process of getting up every morning and learning where you're going to go based on where you've been and where you'd like to be. There's no other way I can think to describe it.
And the very idea of that language that you just said, which is where. And the where, as you can see, starts to influence the who and the what. So I think one of our talents has to do with identifying the place as being a portal into whatever story you want to tell, whatever dream you want to express, whatever character wants to be, depicted by the actors in the script. But it's tuning in to that the place can be so important to not just giving context, but actually clues as to what the vision is about. And so that kind of, to me, goes into the next level, which is, I'm going to joke and say, well, everything you've said so far, anybody up through level 5 can do. So we're not at level 7 yet, but level 6, this is be when you're in your 60s. And the 60s can be taken 2 different ways, which means there's a double entendre always to be had, which is this group was in the late 60s, and we went through our late 60s. But to come back to what I wanted to say was, it's what George Bush called the vision thing. That it's such a great concept.
You're reaching here. Good luck, Rick.
I'm gonna elevate George Bush the senior.
Talk about his paintings.
Yeah. No, that's the son. See, the first one was a conceptual artist. He was an ambassador to China, CIA head. Anyway, the point I would try to make is the level 6. I'm just making this shit up. is where all of this that we've been doing starts to become something where you actually have an idea about it, and you attach it to that idea, and then you see, can you still play out what you were doing, get your job done, and do the movies that you were asked to do in your 60s, take you to a place where you actually have an idea about what you're doing while you're doing it, and you're not ruining the process. So with that said, I'd like to turn it over to Jim to say whatever you would like to say that goes into a place that's philosophical, theoretical, analytical, whatever you want to call it. All I'm trying to make a point of is this is a part of production design, and not everybody gets to do this on a movie and still do their job. I mean, we actually get to dream and think in these areas and then apply it in a certain way. And so I don't know if this will go anywhere, but I know Jim will take at least an entree in. And
I'm going to take my lead after Jim, because I have something I want to comment on. Go, Maestro.
Okay, well, I'm going to go to a transition. How's that? And the transition will be from the written word to those series of images that we start to conjure and shape and form and try to figure out how we want to create the world of the drama. But I'd love to quote, and it's sort of ironic because we're on a panel and we're talking. I don't know if you're familiar with the playwright Pirandello, excuse me, not Pirandello, Ionesco. This is something I learned in theater, which was something that I've used as sort of a guiding beacon for my entire career. His words were, explanation blocks the door to astonishment, which is the only gateway to the incomprehensible. And didn't mean that, your explanations are fine, but we want to be astonished, and I think that's part of. All right. Explanation blocks the door to astonishment, which is the only gateway to the incomprehensible.
Now I'm going to follow up on that.
Okay, go ahead.
Because that was just,
I
that was
do
just
love
too,
Redke.
that was
Redke is
just
my
too
favorite
good.
poet.
Okay. I often have people in sitting at panels like this say, Dennis, what's it like to become a production designer? What does it feel like to be a designer? And you have to think quick, because you got to come up with an answer, right? So I said, well, the simplest way I can say it is, okay, it's a beautiful day, and you're out walking, and you come across a railroad track. And you go, oh, that's kind of fun, so you get on the railroad track, and you're walking on the railroad track, and it's a beautiful day, the birds are tweeting, and so on, and then all of a sudden you hear something really far in the distance. And that sound starts to get louder and louder, and you move a little faster, but you can't get off the track. So you keep going faster and faster and faster, and pretty soon the sound bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and then you're running and running, you're running as fast as you can, and this thing is right behind you, and he whistles and whistles and whistles. That's what it's like to design a motion picture.
I have to say, I have a very similar story. I was working on something which was very problematic, and to clear my mind, I went to an art museum on an afternoon, Sunday afternoon, and I walked into the video room. I usually don't understand a lot about just video art. I walked into the room, and this was the image. An icebreaker in the background, plowing forward, slowly but surely, rising up over the ice, breaking it, rising up on the ice, breaking it. And a man, a person wearing a jacket, walking as if had no idea what was coming up behind him, just walking, 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 walking. And this was like a 15-minute loop. And I sat there for the whole 15 minutes, and I got up and I thought, that is exactly like my life in the film business. It was a real visual revelation. Because the thing we work with every day, all day long, is visual metaphors. That was the perfect visual metaphor for how I felt at the moment. And I look for those in trying to figure out what the sets are going to be. I'm constantly trying to find the best visual metaphor for what's going on in the story, which can also reflect how I feel about what's going on in the story. Because somebody called me to do the job. They didn't call Dennis, or they didn't call KK. They probably should have, but they called me. So they get me, and they get my images of terror and my personal feelings about it.
These environments that we create, though, I think one of the things that gives them life and vitality and creates these visceral images that I think people actually come to see, because people don't come to see a picture book, they don't go to a museum to see pictures, they come to experience something. And it's that interaction between the environments we create and the performers and the way the camera moves through it that sort of unite and form this experience. And we have to be there to explore how do you make this an experience, not just a pretty picture. And I think that's also a talent that comes from that evolutionary process in the very beginning, and that's where we bring most of ourselves to that process.
Well, there's something that I keep remembering that happened to me, and it's probably happened to everybody here, where you're in a discussion about what the location should be, what the environment should be, and suddenly someone says, oh, but it's really just two people talking in a small room with one shot in the background. And I finally got very exasperated with this person saying that, and I said, okay, brother, I'm going to meet you out in the parking lot tomorrow morning with 2 grip stands and a roll of Duvetine, and the costume designer will go to here. And let's see, how many people want to pay $17.25 to see that movie? Honestly.
I think the best qualities of a production designer, and I think it's unavoidable, you're just kind of born with it, you can't get rid of it, is be curious, be restless. Don't be satisfied. Just be because it'll create dynamics. If you're curious about something, you'll want to show something that's interesting, at least to you. And then you're restless. That means, okay, I'm tired of that. That was great 5 minutes ago, and now I want to see something else. And now if you're an audience, you can have that same experience. The whole thing we're doing is telling stories visually, but they have to have a dynamic. You know, if it's delightful, it's not going to be delightful in the next 10 minutes. You can't go delightful for 2 hours. It's got to be terrible, delightful, terrible, delightful. You just got to keep it moving. And so if we're restless, then we're going to find something else that tops the last thing.
I was working with a man named Peter Weir on The Truman Show, And we spent about 2.5 weeks in this little village that I found. And you know, we had breakfast, lunch, and dinner together. And so we're sitting there one evening having dinner, and I said, so how do you think, and this is relating to learning from directors, how do you think about film when you start a film? And he said, oh, it's always pretty simple. It's music. And I said, oh, well, what's your reference? And he says, well, you invite a bunch of people into a dark room, and then you have to wake them up. I always use Beethoven's Fifth. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. All these false crescendos. So I started designing my, what I call the wall, which I learned from Dean Tavaleras, was the visual narrative. And it was always about music. What would the music be? And I always asking, what are you thinking about music? And he said, I haven't thought about it yet. Start thinking about it. Okay, what do we do? How, because in the end, it's a lot of stuff that we're watching and hearing and seeing. And that's really, to me, was one of the greatest lessons. We're never alone.
So are you aware of Froebel and Froebel blocks? Janine, have you heard of Froebel blocks? Yeah. Yeah, so the whole point, it was 1830s, he invented these blocks that that maintained a cube, and then you would break them up, and they would be little squares or little shapes, but they would always come back together as a cube. And children that would start playing with these blocks at a very early age were much better at math, were much better at volume. As a matter of fact,
Frank Lloyd Wright.
Frank Lloyd Wright played with them.
His mother forced him to play with them.
Oh shoot, you have all of their chairs.
His mother made a mobile over his bed.
But the thing is, you're supposed to play with the Froebel blocks while your parents play music. They're playing Bach, or they're playing, they're playing structured music, and so the correlation between the structures of music and these volumes become sort of innate, and very important. Because I agree with you, as a guy that's 70, just like you guys, and you, young lady. To me, it all comes down to music now. It's all about music. They're all about the structures of music and tonality and transitions and everything else.
I mean, you look at old films today, and you look at, Herman Miller. Excuse me, what am I saying? Wrong composer.
Bernard Herrmann.
Bernie Herrmann.
Yeah. You look at the old. The music is so well. Cinematography. There's the gentleman right there, Caleb Deschanel. Thank you, Caleb. The first cinematographer I ever worked with. All of the collaborations. We're never, as I said earlier, we're never alone. And our inspiration can come from so many different things. And it's like when you come, research, find it. Having somebody that can just throw the ideas out to you, and you'll sit and look. There's one little teeny piece of that I like. You cut that out, blow that up, put that somewhere. All these pieces make up the puzzle. We're puzzle makers. And go ahead, Bert.
I wanted to ask you a question because you were talking about the train. How much is stress a part of your process?
My whole life is stress. I was born stressful. But I'm also a Buddhist, and I've been a yogi for 28 years, and 38 years, excuse me. And I've learned how to balance all that out. And that goes back into the films, in the balance of the films. It's been a journey, and as they all are.
And were you a Buddhist in the beginning, or is that something that came from the stress?
It came from the stress because I got cancer. So I had to go through cancer and do the whole process of that, and then there's a whole reanalysis of that. And that when you make that change, be careful what you ask for, you guys. I mean, this is the journey you're going to go on is going to be amazing. I get up every morning, I go, how much fun am I going to have today? This is just going to be great.
Can I just, oh, please. I think you just gave the entree into also the personalization of this process in our lives and how we're making movies, and that, of course, goes into who we all are as people who love to create other worlds and to embody other worlds in our minds, probably from a very, very early age. So the question I would have, and just open it up, is do any of you have what might have been termed by other people disabilities, something that didn't make you, in a sense, perceiving normally? It could be dyslexia, something with your eyesight, something, anything where you felt that you were working against something that would allow you to be normal, and then could not do that, but in a way had that be a motivation to become not only visual, because that would probably be something you might already be, but also to associate it with your own identity, which at this stage might even turn into something that one could term not just magical, but maybe even mystical, and maybe even predictable in retrospect. If you took the kid or whatever that person was dealing with, for myself, I would just, as an example, just say, because of a far-sighted eye and a nearsighted eye, they don't look together. So when I got onto Avatar with Rob Stromberg, who's in the audience, there he is, co-designer, really a powerful visionary, and can paint what he sees, you know, Pandora, for one. But I don't see 3D. So imagine being in a screening room with Jim Cameron, and everybody's talking about the interocular distances and everything it's making for the 3D, and getting into it and parsing it. And they're very smart people. And I'm going, you know, at first I just realized, ooh, and I'd already worked on a 3D movie, so I knew really well no matter what I did, I wasn't going to see it. I mean, I was no finessing it. But what I actually did was I internalized the problem to make it, I think, what was my contribution to the movie, which was I started thinking about the third eye as associated to 3D, and where could I find that? And that was inside my head, and I thought about that as being the place from which the Avatar experience actually is being visualized in the movie. Because if you actually think about the plot of the movie, it's just a guy who lies down in an MRI machine, he's a cripple, and then woo, 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 blue, yellow, red, and he wakes up 9 feet tall and runs around. Now, if you try to sell that to somebody as a pitch, you go, well, wait, what would you say? Red, yellow, blue, woo, 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 are we in the 60s? That's all that happens in the movie.
Only you could do that, Rick.
Well, I think I think that what I did is I launched in that place that I like to go, and Rob and I have had infinite conversations, is to be the believer in what's being told to me by the words and the director, and try to make it make sense. So in my own convoluted way, it was to take the deficit of not seeing 3D, but to try to understand what Jake Sully's actual journey would be like, and then what that duality might come across as. And of course, when you look at the movie, that duality is front and center all the time. But just wondering if any of you have felt that that was something that you had in your past that has always been there and helped motivate where you went in order to become a production designer and to visualize for 6 or 7 decades now.
Isn't film 2D? You may have a big advantage over others.
Where was he?
I had my father told me something when I was 12. I was sitting on a little hill in front of our house, and he came up and sat down next to me, and he said, "Infinity." And he got up and he left. And I've been thinking about that ever since.
And now, if I may just say, can you just describe what you do with directors in terms of offering them a word, and when you've done it.
Okay.
And then the word that came back to you. Okay, just because I know a little bit. I didn't know what related to your dad, though.
Miller's Crossing, first Coen brother film, read the script, didn't understand it. Read the script again, kind of like reading Shakespeare, kind of started to understand it. Went into the meeting. There was one little piece of the script that didn't have a clarification, which I found really strange because it was the title of the film called Miller's Crossing, but there was no reference to what it was. And so I had a little armor going in, and I said, I have one thing that I really want to say. I said, I didn't understand the script, but I kind of think I understand it now. But I want to give you one word, and if we can agree on one word, then maybe we can make this movie together. And the word is columns. And Joel and Ethan kind of looked at each other and like, you know, going, who in the fuck is this guy? And they said, well, what do you mean? They said, well, it's a big dick movie to start with, and Miller's Crossing is going to be a forest. And they said, we want to work with you. And so you opened the door to an adventure. And the adventure is going to be like we've all gone on, you know, and we've all done this in our own same way, is how do we go about doing it? How do we get in? You're going to have to get in the door somehow, and what do you say? And how do you make it interesting for, you know, for yourself and for the directors and the people that you end up working with?
So here's what I want to say. My heart goes out to all the young people trying to get into this racket now, because I have seen firsthand what you have to do to get in the door, to get a job. You basically, I've seen this. People make they do the job to get the job. They design the movie to show it in an interview with no guarantee they're going to get the job or that it won't be stolen. It's just insane what kids have to do now. I think it's probably similar for us. You'd go to a job interview, and first they would, you know, well, like when I went to meet Mike Nichols, first I got pre-screened by producers just to see if I was, you know, a psycho or not. And then they would fly you to New York for a day, basically, to go meet Mike. And he said to me, and this is right after Edward Scissorhands, which he was impressed by, go figure. And he said, how did you do that? And I said, well, we just did it. And that was basically the end of the interview, and I got the job. It was so much simpler. I would go to an interview and just, similar to the one-word thing, just allude to a tone, to a vibe, you know, with some obscure sentence, maybe a picture, but very little, very just minimalist, and you know, you'd get hired. Now you got to design the whole movie to get the movie. It's crazy.
Well, I had a very funny experience similar to yours. I went to talk to a guy named Andrei Konchalovsky about doing a film which no one's ever seen called Maria's Lovers. And I called everybody I knew who might know who he was in Hollywood and didn't find out anything. And then I made some phone calls to people in the Russian community, and I found out everything. Within 2 hours, I knew who his father was, who his mother was, who his grandparents were, what they had done for a living, and what his reputation was like on the set. Okay, so I think I'm all prepared. I'm going to go in and talk to this guy. I open up the door, I walk in, I sit down, he looks at me and he says, I have seen your work in Tender Mercies. It is very strong. tell me, my dear, are you Protestant? Am I a Protestant? And from that followed a 20-minute discussion about theology and how different ethnic groups' backgrounds in religion affect how they see the world, how they react to the world, how they deal with environments in a different way. And we had this wonderful discussion for 20 minutes. He looks at his clock and he says, "Oh, my dear, I am late for haircut. Goodbye." And I thought it was pretty crazy. And the next day I get a phone call from the producer saying, "Oh, he really liked you." So, know how to talk about theology. I mean, these are the crazy ways we used to get jobs.
But there's a historical precedent here. I mean, we are part of a longer continuum of artists and painters. I mean, have you read by any chance, the moving image? Who was it? I can't remember her name. Who wrote the book? But her premise basically is that Northern European art, the Vermeers and the Rembrandts, that's proto-cinema. It's developing the cinematic language visually by just taking and having these realistic situations. And I quite honestly, I have to say, that's where I go for so much research. But also you go back to religious imagery, and that starts to get us sort of to the ground zero of what is art and why it's so vital. Is it does orient you. It provides context for life. It gives you
Provides
an operating
context.
blueprint.
What they,
and it's-
excuse me, what they say is everybody steal from the best.
Yeah.
That's a constant, I guarantee it.
Yeah. But I'm going to just leap from that into what we were talking about earlier, this analytical idealism, which is a philosophy that says, it's sort of Schopenhauer 2.0, and it says that, everything is mental. So if everything is mental, what we do is we're not really experiencing reality. Reality is far, far too complex for our brains. And so we wind up looking at things basically through an instrument panel. We have instrument panels that come to us through culture, through biology, through genetics, that give us the necessary information to survive and to experience the chaos that's going on out there. And that ultimately artists step away from the instrument panel every once in a while and they expose themselves to the sun, to the chaos and the craziness. And then they come back before they die. Sometimes they come back and they die. But they come back and they help people tweak those instruments. And that's what we do with really interesting, carefully observed films and carefully observed settings, and telling people this is the craziness out there, and this is how people react in it, and that's why people shell out the $17 to go see these movies.
Amen, my brother.
I think we're talking about the interview with who you're going to go to war with, because that's kind of what it's like. Even though I haven't been, I've been to our version, our metaphoric version on films. I think that what the person on the other side of the interview is looking for is somebody that they can be in the trenches with, somebody they can get dirty with, somebody they can get lost with, somebody that they can say, I don't know what we're going to do, And you go, what about this? You go, that's a great idea. And you can go, I don't know what we're going to do. What are we going to do here? And it's a back and forth ping pong game. And I think that the collaboration system, which is what we're in with this thing called film, it's very reliant on people trusting each other and just getting raw with each other and saying, like, we'll figure it out. And as soon as they know that you're the person that they can hang with, if they can hang with you for 30 minutes and talk about theology, then they can really talk about the sets if they need to. But that's really not what we talk about. We talk about abstraction, and then we also do that thing called production design.
I think to follow up on some of this discussion, going in for meetings, I've been very fortunate is that it's just been a discussion. and I never showed him drawings or photographs or anything, but we often would talk about the situation. But one time I went up with a young director during his first film, and I didn't get the film, and he called my agent and said he didn't bring one image. So
I'm exactly the same way, and I was kind of surprised. And
You didn't want to do that film, I guarantee
no.
you.
that's quite possible, but it's you know what? It's a double interview. You're interviewing them as well.
Exactly.
Do I trust this situation?
Yeah.
Are they gonna really stick their neck out and play here?
That's a healthy approach because it's difficult to make any film, and it's especially difficult for production designers, I think. Because first you have to get into the mind of the director to figure out what film he wants to make, and then you have to, with creative reasoning, figure out how to make it.
Or you tell them how to make it.
Yeah.
That's the other side of it. It's a two-way street. As I said, ping pong. I like that analogy because it's really important that you can give back to each other, and that builds that strength. And that strength is how you're going to get through all of it.
Yeah, you need that trust. Otherwise, it's impossible to do what we do.
You're going back to your railroad being pursued by the oncoming locomotive, there's another analogy that I like to use too, which is Sisyphus pushing the rock up the hill. In the very beginning, you've got a whole group of people, and they're all pushing their own rock. And I think that's one of the purposes of an art department as we go through this process is to say, no, you're pushing this rock. This is the rock we're pushing up, and as soon as you get all those people united behind that rock, then the rock slowly but surely starts to get a momentum of its own. And by the time you reach the end of the process, you're all running after the rock because you're trying to keep up with it, and then finally you just have to let it go out there and it's on its own.
So if you take all of that, that gets you up to 69 years. That's not level 7 yet. That's talking the steps. And wherever you are, it's just trying to begin to articulate what you might have in front of you if you have a life in production design. And to be true to the title of this seminar, whatever we want to call it, is, it's a life in production design as a philosophy and an art, I would add. So the question is there a way for us who are visual, and we're doing our best to use our words, but to begin to use our words in such a way that helps not just production designers, but everybody who makes a movie begin to discuss it, not in place of what we do just to get our jobs done, whether it's, cinematography, editing, producing, any part of it, but to have an ability to see this bigger picture and also the intimate picture that we're all actually doing. And for the most part, probably with the great group of directors that this group has worked with, they're making their best attempt to do something that's personal to them and something that can be commercial. How we interpret that and then be true to ourselves. And so now we're getting into the zone of where we think we're in Los Angeles. We think we're in Hollywood. You think you're at AFI. You're in a tradition of American cinema, but it's bigger than that. And that's what we all discovered, those of us who were on Spetses. And now I'm trying to just pinpoint that it's not about having been there. It's about being here now. And by the way, the guy who shot Being There is Caleb. And if anybody has seen that movie actually defines what for me personally, is the place. And it's fleeting. You don't get to just stay and hang in that place. But it's when everything kind of comes together and the President of the United States quotes you about the garden and the economy, and at the end, they want to nominate you for president because you're the only person who can be standing in the midst of the chaos. And then to go to the final thing that I would say that maybe we can address is the world's very chaotic, and we know that, moment by moment, generation by generation. Movies have an amazing ability to order that chaos. And the process of actually going into a movie, seeing all the chaos that you're confronted with, and then, the old school version is you got a VHS or a disc. Now you don't even get that. It's an ethereal streaming something that's somewhere. But the point is, through that process of making something, you ordered it. Now, why does that relate to Spetsis or Greece? Because that's where the philosophers of Western civilization had so much to say about the nature of how we think and how we live. And, of course, for me, when I was there, one of the things that I got turned on to was that Socrates, who was sort of given the position, first of all, he might not even have existed, and it doesn't matter anymore. You're never going to prove it one way or the other. So knock yourself out. But what was he talking about? He was ultimately saying, when handed the hemlock, either you live and don't examine your life and cause problems, or you examine your life, and then you're going to have to die. And he chose death. All I'm saying is, this is not a group that wants to face that situation. What we get to do, though, is if you were Socrates, who would you want on your team, your staff? You'd want a visual philosopher to help extrapolate what that represented, the values, the high ideals of humanity, and how can that last for centuries. And one of the ways is to have it be visual and not overtly words and political and platform. So everything that we do, every movie that you saw up there, I believe, is a part of an epoch. And 10 years from now, you won't know who did which movie. It won't be possible. Just like with Dick and Dean. And we made a point of that we weren't going to leave this whole process as two people that didn't talk to each other. So that's what this is us talking. And then trying to convey what now is level 7 if we're talking. And this is the hippie generation, the counterculture that didn't know what they were doing.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you. Yeah, well, it's going to keep going. Yeah, it's going to keep going. But, we've all been there. We've all been there, through all of our
Is there going to be a
journeys.
level 8?
I don't know which, it's like one of the 10 Little Indians, which ones?
I think, yeah.
Rick, I was thinking of something while you were talking, which it's always seemed to me that the principle by which artists proceed is a principle of selectivity. If you are a writer, you select certain words and not others to say what it is that you have in yourself to say. If you're a painter, you select certain colors. If you're an actor, you select certain voice, certain gestures. If you're a designer, you select certain structures, certain colors, certain environments, and you put them in a row on a necklace, if you will. And the story is a necklace. It goes from small to big to small again, however it proceeds. But it proceeds always according to the principle of selectivity. Who is selecting what to say, what needs to be said in the end?
Which all comes down to story.
Yeah.
I just want to say that, at this point in my life, my career, the thing that I have learned, I thought we were going to talk something like that, is this job's fantastic because it's an amazing collaboration with an insane number of talented people, and when it all clicks, it's like crack. Not that I've had that. You have, right? No, and what I have realized is it's always about the people that you hang out with, that you work with, the process and the people. At this point, the product almost is one of the least important things. It's the people you meet, the people you get to hang around with, the people who under stress and in moments of incredible exhaustion are able to laugh and do the job. The people you love and adore and work with, actors, set decorators, all of them. It's just, that's the most fantastic part of this job, are the people.
Sometimes.
And sometimes there's assholes. Sometimes.
No, you got to remember that you might be lucky and have some good films. You're inevitably going to have some bad films. You can't control that, but you can control your environment, and it's your life. It's not just your resume, It's really your life, and this is a great life to live. You get to explore, you get to run around, you get to meet people all the time, you get to lose those people and meet another batch. It's just, it's the best thing. But just make sure that that's more important than the job, and then do the job very, very well.
And the other thing is that I love about this job, it's not a job, is and I think we touched on this earlier, is being able to escape into, when you really get into it, you can escape to an alternate reality that is far more beautiful than the horror that we live in. Not that there's anything bad going on in the world right now. I think we're in good shape, right? The environment, the war in Israel, Ukraine, the Congress. No, you can escape and live an alternate reality.
It's called jet lag.
Well, I think the thing that we all have to remember is that none of us up here could do a great job unless somebody or somebodies asked us to do a great job, demanded a great job of us, gave us the space to do the great job, gave us the time, and gave us the money. Because you won't do a good job if you are not invited to do it.
And in conclusion,
I'm running out of steam, man. I tell you. What else do you want to know?
Yeah.
Come on.
In conclusion, wrapping it all up in one big, it's impossible, obviously. But the thing that I would like to say is I hope that we've conveyed something of what was discovered last year and are bringing it this week through the Production Design Collective in Ball and Colina, what they've put together that actually is so much bigger than the sum of the parts. And something tapped into it, and that's why we all came together in Los Angeles, and all of you came, and thank you for doing it. It's a small group of people, but we have this kind of participation in a great form of art, and I think that there's a philosophical component to what the experience of making it is that is just beginning to be understood, and that as production designers, we get to actually do that while we're doing the job. It's an amazing thing. Most people can't do that because they're just so overwhelmed by what they're doing. That's not that we think all these thoughts while we're doing them, but it's part and parcel of who you get to hire. It's like, who did you learn from? And I'll just go, well, Socrates. And they go, oh, that sounds interesting. And he's going, well, what do you make of that? You go, well, columns, and I rest my case. I mean, that's kind of obvious from that point on. Anyway, the point is, Kalina, please come in and just wrap it up in the sense that this is really her baby. She's the producer.
Thank you.
She's giving us the opportunity.
I have very little to do with this. It was Rick's baby, and he invited all these fantastic people. And I feel like I was just at a Rolling Stones concert, except everybody's Mick Jagger, And I am back there with the drums trying to keep the rhythm. That's basically what my job is. I just want to know if you don't know about the Production Designers Collective and you're not a member, remember it's free. So find us. We're online. Find us, become a member, join us, come to Spetzes. So what we're doing in, odd number years, right? This is 2023, right? Okay. We're doing the International Production Design Week. In odd number years, even, there you go. I always need Rick to help me. We go to Spetzes, and it's so the International Production Design Week involves the entire art department and outside of it, and it's all the collaborative friends that we have. When we go to Spetzes, however, it's only 300 of us, plus including students and educators, and we get to meet Socrates. So that's basically, that's our mission. He's there. That's it. Thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate it. Thank you.